Howdy-o, what do you know, it is Rabbit, and we're back to fixing Baldur's Gate 3 feats as shown in my top 10 list. We're gonna shake up the order a bit though and go into the absolute worst feats this week, dealing with the ones that really just didn't stand out. And we're gonna try to stand out from the crowd ourselves, not dealing with the obvious fixes where we can. Especially, this is about not overpowering these feats, but putting them in the running. If you haven't seen my worst feats in BG3 video, check that out right up there in the top right corner, and a bundle of other things are available in the description. Also, there will be spoilers, obviously, so keep that in mind, especially since we'll be going from the worst feat and working progressively down the list. So if you're hoping to see how we fix this utterly disappointing mess of nothing, you don't need to wait very long. Let's get to work. Number 1, Weapon Master. Weapon Master topped the list as the worst feat in the whole game. If you're curious why, you know where to go. Weapon Master gives you +1 to either strength or dexterity and allows you to choose 4 weapons to have proficiency with. It's plain old-fashioned bad in every sense of the word because it will never be chosen in its current form. I've come up with something I think will make this work just fine, but we also have to change the name to Arms Master. You'll see why. You gain +1 to either strength or dexterity up to a maximum of 20. You gain proficiency with all weapons and shields. Finally, if you chose strength when you use a weapon action with a melee or a thrown weapon, you add your proficiency bonus again to the check. If you chose dexterity, the same applies to finessable and ranged weapon actions for all ranged or thrown weapon types. This effectively acts as expertise on the check rather than just proficiency, since you get proficiency to the check already. I chose to split things up this way but have a little bit of overlap because I feel like these weapons are more situated to one stat or another, and this actually allows you to have a bit of choice with this feat. You only get to choose it once, so keep that in mind. This is a massive boost to the accuracy of weapon actions and the versatility of the feat without intensely overpowering it. I've seen some iterations that allow you to have an additional fighting style, but honestly I don't want to add that because it's not about weapon mastery, that's about combat mastery, which is different. You might see it crop up a bit later, but not in this feat. No, I think this plays out nicely, and a weapon master doesn't feel like a stronger person. They're a master who's more skilled and more able to land techniques when and where it matters. Number 2, Performer. I had a hell of a debate between this and Weapon Master for the worst feat. Performer is just terrible in its current form, granting +1 to charisma and musical instrument proficiency, which is useful in exactly 2 instances in all of BG3. Impressing an admittedly lovely tiefling who's way out of your league, and begging for money on the streets like a
poverty-stricken citizen.
Oh, brilliant.
We could do a hell of a lot better, can't we? You gain +1 to charisma up to a maximum of 20. You gain musical instrument proficiency and proficiency with performance, or expertise in performance if you already had proficiency. Finally, you may choose a unique aura to play that affects a 10-foot radius around you and lasts until you long rest, or until activated. Once used, you cannot use this until you perform a long rest again. I propose 3 arias. The aria of Calming as a reaction before an attack hits you or a target within the radius of your aria. You may impose disadvantage on the attack roll. If this causes the attack to miss, you cast Calm Emotions as part of the reaction on the attacker using your charisma modifier. It acts as the spell. Aria of Enthralling. As a reaction before an attack hits you or a target within the radius of your aria, you may impose disadvantage on the attack roll. If this causes the attack to miss, you cast Enthrall as part of the reaction on the attacker, using your charisma modifier. It acts as the spell. Aria of Silence. As a reaction before a spell attack hits you or a target within the radius of your aria, you may impose disadvantage on the attack roll. If this causes the attack to miss, you cast Silence as part of the reaction centered on the attacker using your charisma modifier. It acts as the spell. Now isn't this just a hell of a lot more fun than playing instruments? Your instruments should mean something and not just be gimmicks. I defy you to tell me that it's worse now than the joke of a feat it was prior. Number 3, Lightly Armored. Sadly, this one is a feat that you really can't do much with, but I'm gonna try without massively overpowering it or shifting the goalpost of mediocrity beyond another perk. Normally, it gives you a choice between +1 to strength or dexterity and light armor proficiency. We gotta fix this, right? Let's try something here, but we're gonna have to rename this to better fit its new perks. Let's call it Guarded. You'll see why in a moment. You gain +1 to either strength, dexterity, or constitution up to a maximum of 20. You gain proficiency with light armor if you didn't have it already. If you did, you gain proficiency in medium armor. If you have proficiency in both, you gain proficiency in heavy armor. Regardless of which armor proficiency you acquire, you also gain proficiency with shields. This feat can be chosen up to 3 times. Finally, my little caveat here. While wearing armor, you have a 20% chance to gain temporary hit points equal to your proficiency bonus if an attack misses you, but not as a result of rolling a critical miss. The reason I chose to enter this exactly as it was is because I wanted there to be a specific range whereby the armor itself always absorbs the damage. In my opinion, 16 to 19 was that kind of range, because that goes outside of dexterity modifier plus the base 10 AC. And obviously a 20 is always going to be a critical, so you can't really deal with that. So that's the logic behind it, but technically speaking, it doesn't change what happens if somebody has a lower crit threshold. If they hit a 19 and they could crit on a 19, they'll still crit on a 19. This is just kind of an FYI thing. It seems weird to be giving shield proficiency twice, but the contexts are different in both instances. Plus, shields aren't just arms, they're armor too. The shield is an incredibly versatile tool, so we'll let this be a thing in both feats. Also, this allows us to keep the proficiencies tied up in one feat, though this may cause chaos with subclasses that also gain proficiency, so we'll probably just treat that as a noob trap instead of trying to account for every variable. Call me lazy, but I've played a lot of RPGs, and honestly, it's probably better just to let someone figure this thing out for themselves. You can respec for free in BG3 anyway, with a little bit of pickpocketing. Now, you're probably noticing a problem right off the bat. We've just consolidated 3 feats, meaning this video is going to be a lot shorter, right? No worries, because I'm going to be adding a feat at the end to make up for it, one that always should have been there, but just somehow never managed to exist in 5e. Be patient, all. I've got you. Number 4, Durable. Of all the feats on this list, I always seem to forget durable is a thing. It's bad, for sure, but it feels like an on-paper good feat for self-sustain, doesn't it? Kinda like tanks could use this. It gives +1 constitution and replenishes all your hit points on a short rest, rather than half on a short rest. I think what I'm noticing with this is the same issue that Tough had, which is that it's boring as picking crabs out of your sack on Sunday. Remedy incoming. You gain +1 to constitution up to a maximum of 20. Whenever you are healed by a potion, spell, or ability, the total healing you receive is increased by your constitution modifier. This is added after all other effects. If you are healed via a short rest, increase the amount you are healed by your constitution modifier times your character level. Finally, if you take damage equal to or less than your constitution modifier, you take no damage instead. The additions on this feat make it competitive with Tough, but not quite as universal. Where Tough's rework, oh, by the way, check out my previous video in the series in the top right corner, just gives flat damage reduction, this has protections in place, giving you an extended sort of damage floor of 5 points as opposed to 0. I think this works a lot better for tanks, but it also helps anybody who wants to frontline fight with the best of them. Number 5, Ritual Caster. So we're starting with the spellcasting ones already, huh? Alright, here we go. Ritual Caster gives you the ability to cast 2 out of 6 ritual spells in the list, which can be cast for free outside of combat, and excluding jump, last until a long rest. This needs a fucking bump, doesn't it? It's trash, especially when you can outright replace it with items later in your adventure. Here's what I came up with. Oh, and this is called Ritual Master now. You gain +1 to either Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma up to a maximum of 20. You gain the following ritual spells to cast at the respective levels listed below. At level 4, you automatically gain Disguise Self, Enhance Sleep, Featherfall, Find Familiar, Longstrider, Speak with Animals, and Detect Thoughts. At level 6, you will gain Arcane Lock, which is now treated as a ritual spell, Silence, and Speak with Dead. At level 8, you'll gain Animate Dead and Conjure Animals, both of which are treated as ritual spells now. Conjure Animals will be limited to conjuring either 1 giant elk or 1 rhinoceros at a CR2, or 2 dire wolves or 2 giant vultures, each at a CR1. They act independently of the player, but are friendly creatures. Now that makes this spell seem a little more impressive if I might toot a horn of mine. It's actually worthy of being noted and even taken. We'd have to add the Conjure Animal spell to the game, obviously, but that's pretty easy to do considering all of the other summons that exist. And then maybe Ranger will have a few interesting spells, huh? I think having full access to the ritual spells in the game gives this a much wider appeal, personally. Let me know what you think. Number 6, Heavily Armored. Just pranking you. We've already dealt with this already, so we'll be skipping to number 7, Martial Adept. Honest opinion? I hate this feat. Not only is it crappy, but it actually does harm to the Fighter Battlemaster subclass by straight up ripping off its main feature. Normally, you get access to a few Battlemaster maneuvers and a superiority die to fuel them that you can replenish on resting. I truly want to just rework the whole thing, dropping all that garbage in favor of something more interesting. You learn a fighting style from the following list: archery, defense, dueling, great weapon fighting, protection, two-weapon fighting, and unarmed fighting, which will be a new one. Unarmed fighting allows you to deal 1d4 damage with unarmed strikes instead of the usual 1. This is increased to 1d6 at level 8 and 1d8 at level 12. You may also perform an unarmed strike as a bonus action on each of your turns as long as you have a free hand to do so. Now this actually puts somebody on parity with a monk to a certain extent, allowing you to test out different builds like the Raging Barbarian unarmed fighter. And in addition, you also gain an additional reaction. What fits a martial adept better than being good at martial combat? They should be experienced in a wide variety of combat styles. Giving them an additional reaction is also good for dealing with multiple foes, which a warrior would certainly be accustomed to. All in all, this completely reworks and reinvigorates what otherwise is one of the worst feats in the game. Number 8, Dungeon Delver. Dungeon Delver is a bit lame, and honestly, these perks seem like things that every single adventurer who's been tested in a delve, crypt, trappy house, or other venue should just intrinsically have. What's more, I've read a ton of things that say this feat doesn't even work as it says it does, but even if it did, it would be a bad feat. I kinda gave the most impressive perk of the old feat, advantage on perception checks to detect hidden things, to alert in the form of a +3 bonus to the same. And the other two major perks, those being advantages on saves versus traps and resistance to trap damage, were never enough to carry the feat. We've got our work cut out for us, but I promised in that previous video an overhaul, and I aim to deliver. You have advantage to saves made against traps and resistance to trap damage. You automatically detect secret passageways if you are within 10 feet of them, including areas that you may be too large to enter, as well as switches or levers to access passageways. The switch will be highlighted if you are nearby. After a short or long rest, if you failed to detect a trap, you get another attempt to do so when you enter within 10 feet of it. You are treated as one size smaller when you attempt to enter a secret passageway. You can break down wooden doors that are not magically locked. You can also break down stone, steel, or magically sealed doors that have a DC equal to or less than 10 plus your proficiency, plus your strength modifier. If the door is locked, it is burst open. You gain 30 feet of dark vision in addition to any you may already have. This is a massive number of perks, but it's way more suited to dungeon delving than the previous version was. The original Dungeon Delver was laser focused on traps and secret doors. This keeps that flavor, but fully encompasses the kinds of things you'll be doing out of combat in dungeons in BG3. It's way more well-rounded, and despite its perks being situational, there are now a plethora more situations in which this feat will shine. Number 9, Mage Slayer. Wow, is this a convoluted mess of rare situational perks all boiled down to relegating this feat to the lowest of low priorities. Normally, it gives big bonuses to attacking and defending against casters in melee range, and you can really mess with concentration when you hit them, but what crazy caster is actually going to give you the opportunity to take advantage of this in BG3? From my memory, most of these dudes will risk an opportunity attack to get away from you, then cast. It's not a good feat, and never the right one to choose. Hell, it wouldn't even be that good in tabletop, where the NPCs could change tactics or just not perform the same maneuvers due to programming. We gotta modify this crap, and I'm just gonna say it, we're throwing most of this out to revamp the feat. You have advantage on saving throws against spells. Enemies you hit have disadvantage on concentration saving throws. Once per long rest, when a spell is cast on you, you may cast counterspell using a reaction. It acts as the spell. You cannot cast this reaction if the spell only targets an area or if the spell targets someone other than yourself, though if the spell is directed at you and also has area effect consequences, you may still use this reaction. Your counterspell uses your character level for the check as if you are a full spellcaster. The spellcasting modifier is dependent on your class: intelligence for fighter, rogue, and wizard, wisdom for barbie, cleric, druid, monk, and ranger, and charisma for bard, paladin, sorcerer, and warlock. It's weird, but Mage Slayer actually didn't feel all that much like you were especially good at slaying mages. Also, are all Mage Slayers melee characters? Why? An archer would make a far superior anti-magic unit. This gets rid of all that arbitrary range penalty nonsense, adds a proper anti-mage reaction, and though it's a bit less internally synergistic, widely expands the usability of the feat. Number 10, Skilled. This one's simple. You currently gain proficiency in 3 skills of your choice. The skills are unlimited, meaning you get to choose skills your class normally wouldn't have access to. This is neat on paper, where certain skills aren't just always better than others because you might have a DM who values the normally crappier ones. However, in BG3, many of the skills are useful for nothing more than lore, or in the case of performance, disappointment. The intelligence-based skills in particular have some of the worst utility in the game outside of arcane and religion for generating inspiration. I think where this feat goes wrong though, at least as far as we can fix, is not being able to contribute to success very much. If you're so skilled, you should be able to pass checks without too much issue in those areas, since you're remarkably capable even compared to an adventurer whose level of skill is usually exceptional when seen in light of that of your random commoner. I propose the following change. You gain proficiency in 4 skills of your choosing, and expertise in 1 skill of your choosing. Once per long rest, if you fail a skill check, you could treat that failure as a success as long as you have proficiency or expertise in the skill you use to perform the check. The feat needed an overhaul, and it gets it here. Adding another skill and 1 expertise means that you really actually properly are well-rounded, an expert in something. And the extra caveat of once per long rest lets you play with the notion that you actually did come across the correct answer. You could MacGyver something on the fly, or you just use your other skills in unique ways to make sure you overcome the challenge. Somehow. Who cares? Role-playing takes over at that point. All that matters is that this is way cooler than the original and still not too overpowered considering what you're sacrificing to get skilled. Now, as promised, time to provide another feat to take the place of the armored feat chain. Number X. Light Armor Master. This feat probably makes light armor users a bit powerful, but let's test the waters and see what we can do with this. Considering the inconsistency in other armor types having a feat, all of which will be improving in later videos, Light Armor Master should at least be as useful as they are now. Alright, let's see if I can modify this armor without being absurd, but you be the judge. You gain +1 to either strength or dexterity up to a maximum of 20. You are resistant to the damage caused by opportunity attacks. Your damage taken from non-magical fire, acid, or other persistent hazards, except for cloud effects like poison, is reduced by an amount equal to your proficiency bonus. The reason for the other 2 not so obvious perks is that you're moving at a speed like dancing or twisting in and out of encounters without providing much in the way of an opening to others. I like where this ended up, and it's definitely not too much when seen in light of the other feats on this list. And that's all for my revamp of the worst BG3 feats. Thank you for watching, and be sure to check out everything else popping up on your screen. Leave a comment if you agreed with me, or if you disagreed, or if you have nothing to comment about. Especially you, Todd. Yeah, I remember the argument we had about Performer, and I was right. Role-playing feats suck. You know it, I know it, everyone knows it. Oh, and before I forget, I want to thank all 200 plus of my subscribers for the incredible journey. I wanted to put a video up there documenting the progress of this channel, but I've been so busy with projects and burning out, I haven't really had a chance to get around to it. I'll be sure to have something really cool for next Saturday though as a thank you video, so keep that in mind. I'm out of here, thank you so much for watching and have a great day.